In the warm glow of the living room, Sarah embraces Simon with a profound mix of relief and tender wonder. Simon, preternaturally calm, observes the joyous chaos with a quiet, knowing gaze. Dan, gruff but loving, watches the children, a rare, soft smile gracing his weathered face. The Hirsch family is enveloped in a moment of pure, heartfelt reunion, a tapestry of love and unspoken joy. In the soft glow of a table lamp, Lily and Eric hold Simon, their faces etched with palpable anxiety. Simon's dark, knowing eyes fix on Sarah, his small frame holding an immense, unsettling weight. His child's voice, unexpectedly grave, breaks the silence with a startling confession. I cannot lie. I am connected to two realities. One is Simon, the other is David. In the soft glow of a table lamp, Sarah, Lily, Eric, and Dan share a quiet, profound moment in the living room. An unspoken understanding passes between them, a silent bond forming in the lamplit space. The last shadows of doubt about Simon's extraordinary nature vanish, replaced by collective acceptance. Lily's face radiates, her expression glowing with a deep sense of vindication and triumph. In the quiet of the Hirsch family living room, Dan turns to Simon, his face a canvas of confusion and weariness. The heavy air vibrates with the echoes of recent turmoil, a stark contrast to 8 years of silence. Dan's gaze pierces Simon, a desperate plea for reassurance etched into his very being. His voice, barely a whisper, breaks the tension. Can you promise me there'll be no more surprises? His expression remains calm, almost serene, defying the tension in the air. No anger, no defensiveness, just a quiet certainty in his eyes as he begins to speak. He calmly states, I don't choose my actions, Dan. They are reactions. Simon's voice, steady and clear, declares, I am the remedy to the causes that arise near me. In the dimly lit living room, long shadows dance, cast by the single lamp, creating an atmosphere of unease. Sarah's mom, her face etched with worry, nervously wrings her hands, her gaze fixed on a distant, unseen point. Her practical demeanor barely conceals a deep, underlying apprehension, a silent battle against fear. She voices her deepest fear. I'm just worried about what's next. The unspoken terror hangs in the air as she suggests, maybe we should go back to Chicago. In the Hirsch family living room, the soft glow of a table lamp casts long, unsettling shadows. Sarah stands rigid, her posture betraying a heavy burden, facing her mother, seated in a plush armchair. The air thickens with an unspoken tension, a new, harsh reality settling heavily upon them both. Sarah's voice, firm yet strained, cuts through the quiet. We have to stay in Florida. We can't leave until the FBI clears us. We need to be sure no other criminals are coming after us for retribution. In a stark FBI interrogation room, a plain metal table dominates the space, awaiting its grim reveal. The box, a harbinger of truth, sits open, its contents now exposed to the unforgiving light. Stacks of cash, cold and unfeeling, lie nestled beside kilos of illicit cocaine and heroin. A chilling array of weapons, silent and deadly, are meticulously arranged, a testament to dark deeds. Fraudulent court documents, their lies laid bare, complete the horrifying tableau of crime. The overwhelming evidence, just as Simon foretold, speaks volumes without uttering a single word. In a tense FBI conference room, Agent Walker, earnest and rumpled, is locked in a heated discussion with 7 other agents. Their voices, a cacophony of urgency, echo through the room, each word laden with unspoken weight. Suddenly, the door swings open with a soft creak, a harbinger of change. Chief Edwards enters, his imposing figure instantly commanding the space and silencing the room. A hush falls, the buzzing conversation abruptly ceasing as all eyes turn to the chief. The air thickens with anticipation, signaling a dramatic shift in the room's dynamic. In the FBI conference room, Chief Edwards leans back, a sly smirk playing on his lips, surveying the room with a chilling confidence. He claps slowly, the sound echoing ominously, his gaze fixed on Walker with a glint of sarcasm. The air crackles with unspoken tension, thick with an unsettling silence that precedes a storm. With a chilling smile, Chief Edwards delivers his cutting remark. "Congratulations, Walker. On the case, of course." In a sterile FBI conference room, a tense silence hangs heavy as Agent Walker, a faint blush creeping up his neck, faces Chief Edwards. Edwards' skeptical expression is palpable as Walker clears his throat, preparing to deliver unbelievable news. "Chief, I know this sounds improbable," Walker continues. "But the truth is, the actual solver of these murders was an 8-year-old boy, Simon," Edwards retorts. "An 8-year-old? Walker, are you serious?" Walker insists. "He has abilities. He knew things, Chief. Things no one else could possibly know. For instance, he knew about Julie's pregnancy." Chief Edwards' booming laughter shatters the silence of the sterile FBI conference room, a sound of pure disbelief. His eyes, sharp and derisive, fix on Walker, a mocking glint in their depths. "Are you serious, Walker? A child?" He scoffs, his voice thick with scorn. "If a kid can solve our cases, why do we even need this entire bureau?" he demands, his voice echoing with fury. In the FBI conference room, Agent Walker's face is a mask of calm, his composure unnerving. He gestures subtly to the two agents seated silently beside him, their expressions unreadable. Chief Edwards' gaze meets Walker's, a silent challenge passing between them. A subtle implication in Walker's eyes suggests that his colleagues hold the key to his extraordinary tale. Walker breaks the silence, stating, "My colleagues here can corroborate my account, Chief." Chief Edwards turns, his gaze sweeping over the FBI agents in the conference room, their faces a tableau of awe and unease. A silent, shared understanding passes between them as they nod affirmatively, a consensus forming without a single word. An agent's voice breaks the quiet, a hint of grudging admiration in his tone. "The kid is something else." His eyes dart nervously, a flicker of apprehension crossing his face. "I'm honestly a little scared of what Simon might say about us." The lingering silence in the room is heavy with unspoken thoughts and the weight of their collective decision. Chief Edwards' expression is unreadable, a silent acknowledgement of the complex situation they now face. Chief Edwards, his face a mask of disbelief and frustration, paces the quiet FBI conference room. He slams his fist onto the table, the sharp sound echoing through the tense silence. A sarcastic, almost hysterical laugh escapes him as he turns to face the remaining agents. His voice sharp with command, Chief Edwards demands, "I want to see Simon, now!" His gaze intensifies as he delivers another order. "And don't you dare stop the investigation into those crooked cops." A bitter question hangs in the air. "We can't wait for a child to solve all our cases, can we?" In the FBI conference room, Agent Walker's face burns with humiliation and anger as Chief Edwards makes his exit. A ripple of suppressed laughter snakes through his colleagues, their eyes glinting with cruel amusement. The meeting, now a hollow shell, dissolves into an atmosphere of open ridicule and scorn. Walker stands isolated, the weight of their mockery crushing him in the suddenly cavernous room. In the Hirsch living room, the soft glow of lamps casts a gentle light as the family unwinds after a tense day. Sarah's eyes are fixed on Simon, a quiet admiration in her gaze, recognizing his unexpected strength. He navigated the crisis with remarkable composure, embodying the unexpected man of the house in her eyes. A sense of quiet reflection fills the room as the family processes the day's events, bathed in the warm light. Sarah observes David, a stark contrast to Simon's composure, a small, vulnerable presence in the room. The Hirsch family living room is bathed in the soft, comforting glow of lamps, a stark contrast to the day's early attention. Dan, with a thoughtful expression, surveys his family, a silent question in his eyes. He breaks the silence, a hopeful suggestion in his voice. "How about we go out for dinner tonight? A change of scenery might do us all some good," he adds, a gentle plea for connection. In the warm glow of the living room, Jacob, easygoing and kind, nods gently, a silent understanding passing between them. He suggests a way to clear their minds, his voice a comforting balm in the quiet room. Sarah, her expression thoughtful, proposes a simple pleasure, Chinese food. A collective murmur of approval fills the space, a shared moment of agreement and anticipation. The Hirsch family living room is bathed in the warm, dancing glow of a crackling fire, casting long, shifting shadows. Simon sits amidst the comfortable hum of agreement, his expression remarkably serene, a quiet observer. He breaks the peaceful silence with a calm, deliberate declaration. "I'm not hungry." His words hang in the air, a stark contrast to the expected pleasantries, subtly shifting the room's atmosphere. Jacob places a reassuring hand on Simon's shoulder, a silent promise amidst the quiet preparations. The family moves with a hushed efficiency, gathering coats and securing locks, their movements a dance of quiet farewell. Jacob offers a comforting smile to Simon, saying, "Don't worry, you'll be hungry once we get there." The quiet morning in the Hirsch family kitchen shatters at 9 a.m. as the phone's insistent ringing cuts through the calm. Sarah, having just finished breakfast with her family, moves with a purpose, reaching for the jarring sound. In the background, Lily and Eric are a flurry of motion, preparing for school, oblivious to the impending call. The phone's shrill cry echoes, a stark contrast to the domestic scene, as Sarah brings the receiver to her ear. A moment of anticipation hangs heavy in the air as Sarah listens, her expression a blank canvas awaiting news. Golden sunlight bathes a cozy kitchen as Sarah, mid-30s, balances a phone, toast, and a school bag, a slight frown on her face. Her voice, a quiet "hello," hints at a world about to intrude on her morning. An unseen voice, Agent Walker, asks, "Is this a bad time?" Sarah, recognizing the agent, replies, No, the kids are almost ready for school," her tone a mix of politeness and barely contained chaos. Agent Walker stands, his expression grim, as he addresses Sarah and Simon, the gravity of his words clear. His voice drops, serious and low, a chilling tone that demands their full attention. "My boss, Chief Edwards, urgently wants to meet with you both at the FBI office this morning." In the quiet morning kitchen, Sarah's brow is furrowed with deep concern, her eyes scanning the familiar room with unease. The lingering shadows of yesterday's events cling to her, a palpable dread in her wary expression. She braces herself, anticipating new complications, her heart heavy with unspoken fears. Her voice, hushed with apprehension, breaks the silence. Has anything else happened? In the Hirsch family kitchen, Agent Walker's face is a canvas of strained reassurance and simmering frustration. Nothing new has occurred. Chief Edwards just needs to hear Simon's account directly, he explains, his voice tight. His gaze darkens, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. He finds my story unbelievable. A raw, guttural sigh escapes him. It's infuriating, his skepticism. Sarah stands, a subtle furrow in her brow. As she pours coffee, her movements automatic. Her gaze is distant, lost in thought, the coffee pouring unnoticed into the mug. A whisper escapes her lips, a question hanging heavy in the quiet morning. Are we in trouble? In the Hirsch family kitchen, morning light filters through, illuminating Agent Walker's reassuring posture. His words cut through Sarah's apprehension, a promise of safety in the quiet room. He calmly sets a time, 11 a.m., a definitive plan solidifying in the morning air. Sarah, her fear momentarily quelled, nods in agreement, a silent assent to the unfolding events. The unspoken tension lingers, a subtle undercurrent beneath the surface of their calm exchange. A fragile truce is struck, a temporary calm before the storm, as the morning continues its quiet march. In the warm morning light of the kitchen, Sarah hangs up the phone, her face etched with a silent, profound worry. Her gaze falls upon the grandparents, seated at the table, their own faces mirroring her concern as she recounts the conversation. A flicker of displeasure crosses the grandparents' faces, quickly replaced by a quiet, resigned understanding. There is no other path. Lily and Eric, school bags slung over their young shoulders, emerge, ready for the day. Soft morning light spills into the bedroom, illuminating Sarah as she moves with focused grace, preparing for the day ahead. Her hands, gentle and reassuring, carefully dress Simon, a silent ballet of care and tenderness. A thoughtful expression crosses Sarah's face as her mind drifts, a quiet contemplation taking hold. She recalls Agent Walker, his polite demeanor and gentle words echoing in her thoughts. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touches her lips, acknowledging the unexpected decency she found in him. Her actions are precise, her touch tender, as she prepares Simon for the day ahead, her thoughts lingering on Agent Walker's gentle presence. The crisp, insistent ring of a doorbell shatters the quiet late morning, echoing through the air. Sarah and Simon, dressed with an air of anticipation, stand poised by the front door. Sarah reaches out, her hand extending to open the door, a moment of expectation hanging in the air. The door swings inward, revealing a flicker of embarrassment crossing his features. He stands before them, an unexpected, slightly awkward presence at their threshold. The late morning sun bathes the Hirsch family home in a warm, inviting glow, hinting at a serene facade. Agent Walker stands at the front door, his gaze lingering on Sarah, a subtle smile playing on his lips. Sarah, poised and composed, returns his greeting, her eyes holding a hint of unspoken knowledge. A soft "Miss Sarah" from Agent Walker is met with Sarah's calm reply. "Agent Walker, the chief is waiting for you." Agent Walker drives Sarah and Simon, the silence in the car thick with unspoken tension. The engine's hum is the only sound, a constant drone against the building unease within the vehicle. The 20-minute journey stretches, each passing moment amplifying the palpable tension in the air. The Florida FBI head office emerges into view, its modern, imposing structure a stark silhouette against the sky. The building's presence is a silent promise of the challenges awaiting them within its walls. The car pulls up to the imposing building, a final moment of quiet before the storm of their mission begins. The FBI head office reception area hums with purpose, a hive of focused activity as agents and officials move with unwavering determination. Walker, a figure of authority, guides Sarah and Simon through the bustling throngs, their steps purposeful. Amidst the organized chaos, a sense of urgency hangs in the air, a silent testament to the high stakes at play. Their path is unwavering, a direct line drawn towards the formidable office of Chief Edwards. The journey through the heart of the FBI building is a silent symphony of power and imminent decision. In Chief Edwards' office, Walker gestures to the chairs, a silent invitation to Sarah and Simon to be seated. He turns, a professional smile etched on his face, ready to relay their presence. "I'll inform the chief and be right back," Walker says, his voice calm and reassuring. With a final glance, he exits the room, leaving Sarah and Simon in anticipation. The door clicks shut behind him, leaving a quiet tension in the conference room. Sarah and Simon exchange a look, a silent understanding passing between them as they wait. In the sterile conference room, Sarah's eyes meet Simon's, a soft, encouraging smile gracing her lips. She leans in slightly, her presence a comforting anchor in the tense atmosphere. Her gaze holds his, a silent promise of unwavering support. Her voice, a gentle whisper, breaks the quiet. "Just be yourself, Simon. I trust you completely," she affirms. "That's what makes you, you." Her words, a powerful reassurance in the quiet room. In Chief Edwards' office, Simon's eyes gleam with mischief as he gazes at Sarah, a stark departure from his usual self. His face is a mask of utter confidence, a silent promise hanging in the air. The simple utterance of Sarah carries a hidden meaning, signaling David's unseen presence, an unspoken pact. Simon's voice is laced with an unsettling assurance. "Do not worry, Sarah. I know exactly what to say and do." Sarah's fingers, delicate and reassuring, reach out to Simon's face, a silent promise in her touch. Her touch is a tender caress, tracing the lines of his jaw, then gently moving through his hair. Simon calls her name, his voice a distorted echo, yet Sarah remains unfazed, her gaze unwavering. A profound understanding settles in her eyes. She knows it is David, not Simon, who speaks to her now. Her calm demeanor belies the unsettling reality, her touch a beacon of solace amidst the turmoil. In the chief's office, a silent drama unfolds, a testament to an unbreakable bond. In Chief Edward's office, a sudden, resonant throat clearing shatters the tense silence behind Sarah and Simon. Both Sarah and Simon, startled, spring to their feet, their eyes widening with apprehension. They turn to face the formidable Chief Edwards, his towering frame casting a long shadow. Agent Walker guides Sarah and Simon into a vast conference room, the air thick with anticipation. Chief Edwards, stern-faced and bearded, rises from the table, his presence commanding attention. He extends a firm hand to Sarah, a silent assessment passing between them as their hands meet. Turning to Simon, Chief Edwards' gaze sharpens, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Ah, Simon, your reputation precedes you." With a gesture of invitation, he adds, "Please, have a seat, both of you." A subtle challenge in his tone. The room hums with unspoken expectations as Sarah and Simon prepare to take their seats. Around a polished table, Chief Edwards, stern yet welcoming, gestures towards a tray of beverages. Sarah, with bright, curious eyes, politely requests a glass of water, a hint of anticipation in her gaze. Simon, his expression unreadable, declines refreshments, his eyes unwavering as he surveys the room. The air crackles with unspoken intentions as each person settles into their place, the meeting about to begin. In Chief Edwards' office, a silent command is issued for coffee and water, a prelude to a tense discussion. Chief Edwards turns, his gaze now fixed on Sarah, a silent question lingering in his eyes. The air crackles with unspoken words as Chief Edwards awaits Sarah's response. He breaks the silence, his voice firm yet respectful. "Do I have your permission to speak with Simon directly?" The weight of his words hangs heavy, demanding a decision from Sarah. Sarah's expression remains unreadable, her thoughts veiled in the quiet tension of the room. In Chief Edwards' conference room, Sarah's eyes, filled with a silent question, meet Simon's. Simon offers a subtle, reassuring nod, acknowledging her silent query. With a slight inclination of her head, Sarah grants him permission to speak. Simon, without hesitation, directs his words to the chief, his voice clear and resonant. In the stark conference room, the air crackles with an unspoken tension as Simon, outwardly calm, begins to speak. Chief Edwards, usually a rock of stoicism, listens intently, his composure slowly beginning to crack. Simon reveals intimate details of his life, his 3-year divorce from Angela, his mother's recent death. A stunned disbelief washes over Chief Edwards' face as Simon mentions his 5-year-old daughter, Alina. Simon's voice, steady and calm, delivers a truth that hangs heavy in the air, a palpable weight in the room. Chief Edwards sits rigid, his posture a testament to the shocking words he just heard. His eyes, wide and unblinking, betray a mind struggling to comprehend an impossible reality. A silent gasp escapes his parted lips, but no sound follows, as if paralyzed by the revelation. Simon's words cut through the silence. Alina has an undiagnosed ovarian problem, he urges. She needs to see a gynecologist immediately if we want to ensure her future fertility. Chief Edwards' office is thick with unspoken tension, the air heavy with an unsettling silence. His face, a mask of disbelief and deep concern, finally breaks the profound stillness. His gaze darts between Simon and the empty chair, a chilling void where Alina once sat. He struggles to articulate the impossible. I know this sounds impossible, Simon. A desperate plea escapes him. But I need to ask you something. May I call my ex-wife? His voice cracks with urgency. I need to arrange for Alina to see a specialist immediately. Chief Edwards strides from the conference room, phone pressed to his ear, his expression grim. Agent Walker watches him leave, a wave of relief washing over his face. A slow, satisfied smile spreads across Walker's lips, a silent victory in his eyes. The weight of vindication lifts from his shoulders, a quiet triumph in the air. He knows his boss will finally believe him. A hard-won battle now assured. The tension in the room dissipates, replaced by a sense of calm and quiet assurance. Chief Edwards returns to the conference room, a sheepish expression softening his usual stern demeanor. He offers a quick, almost nervous apology for the disruption, his eyes avoiding direct contact. Apologies for that interruption. I just explained Alina's situation to my ex-wife. He begins, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. His gaze shifts, a profound amazement coloring his features. I'm profoundly amazed by Simon. He turns to Walker, a sincere apology forming on his lips. And Walker, I apologize for my earlier mockery. A heavy silence hangs in the air, the weight of his words settling over the room. A heavy silence settles in the conference room, thick with unspoken thoughts and tension. Simon's gaze is unwavering, his voice calm and steady as he reassures Chief Edwards. He insists Alina's future is bright. A doctor's appointment with Dr. Levy just 2 hours away. Chief Edwards watches Simon with a mixture of disbelief and wonder, astounded by his words. Simon leans forward, his voice dropping to a low, urgent tone, revealing the precise location of a high-value terrorist. Chief Edwards and Walker exchange shocked glances, their eyes widening with the immense significance of this intelligence. He details 5 other terrorists accompanying El Maliki, a chilling list of impending danger. A violent virus, hidden within a guitar, is their deadly secret. A revelation that freezes the air. A serene suburban street unfolds, peaceful and picturesque under the bright daylight. The camera drifts slowly towards a modest house, its facade hinting at hidden depths. Through a window, the subtle flicker of a television screen betrays a quiet, unseen drama within. The idyllic calm of the street belies the extraordinary events unfolding behind the closed doors. In the Hirsch living room, the young boy Simon, with deep brown eyes, sits cross-legged on the floor. An intricate tapestry of complex diagrams and news clippings unfurls around him, a web of mysteries. Sarah Hirsch, his mother, stands nearby, her gaze fixed on him, a mixture of concern and awe on her face. Simon's small finger points to a newspaper article, a single detail in a vast, unsolved enigma. The newspaper headline screams of an unsolved crime, its dark words a stark contrast to Simon's calm demeanor. Sarah watches, a silent question in her eyes as her son delves into the world of adult mysteries. In the Hirsch living room, Simon's fingers trace a detail on a newspaper, a hidden truth about the crime. Sarah watches, her eyes widening as a flicker of fear crosses her face, sensing the gravity of his discovery. Simon's voice echoes, "There's a detail here, a hidden aspect of the crime that was never released to the public." His words hang heavy in the air, a chilling revelation that binds them to the unfolding mystery. Sarah's gaze is fixed, her initial fear giving way to a profound sense of unease and growing dread. The newspaper lies between them, a silent testament to a secret unearthed with unsettling implications. In the austere FBI director's office, Director Fleming, a figure of calm authority, watches a video feed. His gray hair is impeccably combed, his face etched with deep contemplation as he observes the screen. The video flickers with the image of Simon, his interview unfolding before Fleming's discerning eyes. Beside him, Agent Walker, with sharp blonde hair and a serious demeanor, intently reviews a file. The quiet tension in the room is palpable as both agents immerse themselves in the unfolding mystery. In the FBI director's office, Agent Walker gestures with a mix of frustration and disbelief toward a monitor. Fleming nods slowly, his gaze fixed on Simon's image, displayed prominently on the screen. Walker's voice, laced with incredulity, declares, "He's describing details only the perpetrator would know, Director." Her eyes widen slightly, the depth of the impossibility settling in as she utters, "It's impossible." The image of Simon on the screen seems to hold a silent, unnerving answer to their disbelief. In the stark FBI interview room, Simon sits calmly, a subtle aura of light shimmering around him. A scientist, bewildered, scribbles notes frantically, trying to keep pace with Simon's extraordinary explanation. Simon elucidates the intricate mechanics of a black hole with a clarity that defies his apparent age. The scientist's face contorts in disbelief, his world shifting with every word Simon utters. In the stark FBI interview room, Simon's eyes hold a startling, ancient wisdom, far beyond his 10 years. His gaze is deep and knowing, a silent testament to experiences unfathomable for a child. A profound calm emanates from him as he speaks, his voice steady and clear. Reincarnation is a continuous learning cycle, Simon states, his words resonating with unexpected authority. The interconnectedness of all consciousness, he concludes, a quiet revelation hanging in the air. In the cold, stark FBI interview room, Sarah sits, a tremor in her hand betraying her inner turmoil. Her gaze, a desperate plea, locks onto her son, a silent promise of protection etched across her face. A subtle quiver runs through her fingers, a testament to the storm raging within her soul. She yearns to shield him, to pull him from the precipice of unspoken truths. Yet, a chilling part of her mind acknowledges the undeniable, crushing truth in his words. Her eyes, wide and searching, track his every move, a silent struggle playing out in their depths. In a dimly lit FBI conference room, complex equations and astronomical charts glow on a large screen, casting an eerie light. Scientists and FBI agents are locked in a heated discussion, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of urgency. An agitated scientist gestures wildly at the screen, his passion igniting the tense atmosphere. His voice cuts through the din. His understanding of theoretical physics is unprecedented. In the sterile FBI conference room, Agent Walker paces with sharp, agitated movements, her frustration a visible storm. Fleming stands by the window, a silent, watchful presence, his gaze sweeping over the room and its occupants. His stillness is a heavy weight, contrasting sharply with Walker's restless energy, an unspoken tension filling the air. Agent Walker's voice cuts through the quiet, her disbelief etched on her face. But how? He's 10 years old. Her voice rises, echoing the absurdity of the situation. There's no logical explanation. A breathtaking panorama of Vancouver unfolds, a vibrant tapestry of urban life stretching to the horizon. The city pulses with a palpable energy, each street and building a testament to bustling existence. Sunlight dances on the glass facades, transforming the towering structures into shimmering beacons. A tranquil normalcy pervades the air, a deceptive calm before an unseen tempest. The urban landscape gleams under the bright day, hinting at secrets hidden beneath its polished surface. Every detail of the bustling city seems to hold its breath, awaiting an impending dramatic shift. Emergency vehicles, a blur of flashing lights, tear through the Vancouver streets, their sirens a piercing shriek. The wailing sirens rip through the air, creating a frantic symphony of urgency and impending chaos. Pedestrians scatter in every direction, their faces contorted with raw fear, a ripple of panic spreading. Each face tells a story of sudden terror, their eyes wide with disbelief as danger approaches. The once bustling street transforms into a scene of pandemonium, a chilling tableau of human vulnerability. A heavily fortified house stands, its dark, uninviting windows hinting at the danger within. SWAT teams and FBI agents surround the perimeter, their weapons poised for action. Snipers are strategically positioned on nearby rooftops, their scopes fixed on the hideout, watching. The air is thick with palpable tension, a silent promise of the impending confrontation. A soldier moves with calculated precision, his form a shadow against the reinforced vehicle. He takes his designated position, his eyes scanning the grim facade of the terrorist hideout. Agent Walker's brow furrows with intense concern as she speaks urgently into her radio, her voice a low, desperate plea. Her eyes dart nervously across the desolate perimeter of the terrorist hideout, scanning for any sign of danger.
Her voice tight with urgency, she reveals the chilling truth. They have the virus. inside a guitar.
A terrifying realization dawns as she warns. Thousands could be infected in minutes. The weight of the impending disaster settles heavily upon her, her gaze fixed on the ominous hideout. Director Fleming arrives at the terrorist hideout, his face etched with a grim resolve. His eyes sweep over the chaotic scene, the weight of the dire situation pressing heavily upon him. The air crackles with tension as he surveys the aftermath, a silent acknowledgement of the danger. A brief, concerned glance passes between Fleming and Agent Walker, a silent exchange of grim understanding. The unspoken words hang heavy, a shared burden of responsibility in their eyes. Fleming's jaw tightens, prepared to confront the harrowing reality unfolding before him. Soldiers in tactical gear move with practiced precision, their faces grim and etched with steely resolve. Their focused eyes reveal the gravity of their perilous mission, reflecting a silent determination. Each movement is calculated and deliberate, a testament to the imminent danger that lies ahead. A silent tension hangs in the air, a precursor to the deadly confrontation awaiting them. Amidst the chaotic perimeter of the terrorist hideout, Simon Hirsch emerges, a stark, tranquil figure. His simple white shirt and dark pants stand out against the camouflage of military uniforms, a symbol of defiance. He walks with an unnerving calm, his presence an enigma amidst the tension. Agents watch him with bated breath, their nervous apprehension palpable as he approaches. His gaze is steady, betraying no fear, as if he holds a secret power over the impending chaos. Agent Walker's face, etched with disbelief, mirrors the grim reality of the terrorist hideout. Her eyes widen in alarm, a silent scream of impending danger. Simon advances steadily towards the danger zone, oblivious to the peril that awaits him. Walker frantically signals him to stop, her gestures desperate and urgent. Yet, Simon continues his relentless march, a determined silhouette against the ominous backdrop. Amidst the chaos of the terrorist hideout, Director Fleming, initially stunned, quickly regains his composure. His eyes narrow with grim determination, replacing the shock that had momentarily clouded his face. He raises a radio to his lips, his hand remarkably steady despite the urgent and perilous situation. His voice cuts through the air. "Hold position! Do not engage the child!" Simon halts, a safe distance from the ominous terrorist hideout, his posture radiating an unnerving calm. With deliberate, unhurried grace, he slowly raises his arms skyward, an unspoken ritual unfolding. A subtle, ethereal aura begins to emanate from him, growing in intensity with each passing moment. The air crackles with unseen energy as the glow around Simon deepens, a silent prelude to power. The once pristine blue sky over Vancouver begins to darken with unnatural speed. Ominous clouds swirl and gather, an unsettling darkness consuming the daylight. A colossal, unnatural vortex of clouds forms, a terrifying spectacle against the sky. The atmospheric anomaly escalates, a dramatic and unsettling change unfolding above the city. The soldiers and agents, their faces previously rigid with tension, now tilt their heads skyward. Utter bewilderment washes over their features as they grapple with an inexplicable change in the weather. Their eyes, once sharp with focus, now dart between each other searching for an answer. Confused glances are exchanged, a silent question hanging heavy in the air, a shared uncertainty. They stand frozen, unsure how to react to this sudden, bewildering shift in their world. A low, ominous rumbling begins, echoing through the air, vibrating through the very ground beneath their feet. The sound intensifies, a deep, resonant growl from the sky, shaking the earth with growing force. The ground trembles, a silent warning of the unseen power descending upon the terrorist hideout. The unseen force builds, the earth itself groaning under the increasing, terrifying weight. A single, piercing point of light ignites the ominous, dark clouds above the terrorist hideout. The brilliant light intensifies, its glow expanding rapidly, threatening to consume the darkness. The light morphs into a blinding, fiery column, descending with terrifying speed. The column of fire aims directly at the hideout, a fiery spear from the heavens. The fiery descent casts an apocalyptic glow, illuminating the terror-stricken hideout below. The column of fire plunges towards its target, an unstoppable force of destruction. A searing column of fire, a monstrous entity, slams into the terrorist hideout with unimaginable force. A deafening roar rips through the air, vibrating the very ground beneath as the building explodes. Instantly, the structure is consumed by a maelstrom of raging flames and splintered debris flung skyward. The ground shudders violently, a testament to the raw, destructive power unleashed upon the hideout. A powerful shockwave rips through the air, sending a violent tremor across the terrorist hideout. Agents are violently thrown off their feet, their bodies tumbling amidst the sudden chaos. A colossal cloud of dust and smoke erupts, obscuring the sky and engulfing the entire scene. The once formidable structure is now a pile of rubble, swallowed by the swirling, opaque aftermath. Agent Walker's face, etched in horror, reflects the inferno that rages before her, a testament to the destruction. Her mouth hangs agape, a silent scream of disbelief and anguish escaping her lips as the flames dance in her eyes. She is utterly speechless, her mind struggling to comprehend the devastating spectacle unfolding before her. The inferno's heat washes over her, a searing reminder of the catastrophic events she just witnessed. Amidst the wreckage of the terrorist hideout, Director Fleming stands frozen, his calm authority shattered by the devastation. His eyes, wide with disbelief, scan the impossible reality before him, a scene of utter destruction. His mind reels, struggling to reconcile the horrifying truth of what he sees. With a guttural growl, his hands clench into tight fists, a silent testament to his inner turmoil. The soldiers, once resolute, now stand stunned into silence, their mission momentarily forgotten. Their weapons, once held with unwavering purpose, now hang limply, lowered in the face of an unseen force. Their eyes, wide with a potent mix of fear and awe, betray the overwhelming power they've witnessed. All gazes converge on Simon, a silent plea for understanding in their bewildered expressions. Beneath a sky that warps and churns, Simon slowly lowers his arms, a silent command over chaos. Dark clouds, once menacing, dissipate with an unseen force, revealing a tranquil sky. He stands unmoving, his face a mask of serene indifference, as if the extraordinary were commonplace. The world returns to normal, yet in Simon's unyielding gaze, a chilling power lingers. A wide, devastating shot reveals the smoldering aftermath where the terrorist hideout once stood. A gaping crater now scars the earth, a testament to absolute destruction. An eerie silence hangs heavy in the air, broken only by the persistent, soft crackling of embers. Smoke billows lazily from the ruins, painting a grim picture against the desolate landscape. In the terrorist hideout, Agent Walker slowly turns her head, her gaze locking onto Simon. Her usually serious demeanor gives way to an unsettling blend of profound awe and paralyzing fear. Her eyes, wide with disbelief, reflect the terrifying truth of the moment. A tremor runs through her as she takes a hesitant, almost involuntary step towards him. The air crackles with unspoken tension, a silent battle raging within Agent Walker. Director Fleming stands rigid, his gaze fixed on Simon, a dawning horror in his eyes. The air crackles with an unseen energy, a silent testament to the child's terrifying power. Fleming's understanding deepens, twisting his features into a mask of shock and awe. Simon, seemingly unaware, embodies a force that shatters the very fabric of reality. Fleming's mind races, grappling with the impossible, the unfathomable truth before him. A chilling realization settles on him. This child is more than intelligent. He is a living paradox. Amidst the chaos, Sarah pushes through a throng of agents, her face a raw canvas of terror and desperate hope. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and relief, scan the scene for a familiar face. Spotting Simon, she rushes forward, a torrent of emotion propelling her into his arms. Tears stream down her face as she embraces him tightly, a silent testament to her harrowing ordeal and profound relief. In the FBI conference room, a large screen casts a stark, chilling glow, displaying images of the Vancouver incident. Scientists and agents, their faces etched with profound shock, exchange uneasy glances, their expressions grim. The air grows heavy with the weight of shattered theories, a palpable tension gripping the room. Each image on the screen is a blow, dismantling their understanding of the world. A collective sense of dread settles over the room as the shocking truth unfolds before their eyes. In the stark FBI conference room, Agent Walker delivers her findings, her voice a low, grave pronouncement. Her grim gaze sweeps across the faces of the assembled agents, a silent challenge in her eyes. She gestures to the large screen, where a series of charred, desolate images flicker. The images of complete incineration speak volumes before she utters a word. There's no trace of the virus, no trace of the terrorists. Only complete incineration, she states, the words chilling. The FBI conference room hangs heavy with tension, its stark walls reflecting the palpable fear in the air. A scientist, his face pale and etched with exhaustion, mutters, his gaze lost in distant thought. His voice, barely a whisper, cuts through the silence. This is beyond anything we've ever encountered. He concludes with a chilling question. It's divine intervention, perhaps? In the cold, sterile conference room, Director Fleming stands, his gaze sweeping over the assembled agents. The soft hum of fluorescent lights fills the tense silence as his serious expression casts a shadow. He takes a deep breath, shoulders squared, preparing to deliver grave news. We are dealing with something entirely new, something we don't understand, he states, his voice grim. Fleming sits at his polished desk, his silhouette framed by the sprawling city lights, a silent witness to his internal struggle. The city stretches endlessly below, a glittering tapestry of silent judgment. In his hands, a stark white file, bearing the chilling label, Hirsch, Simon. The weight of the world seems to press upon him, an invisible burden etched onto his weary face. His gaze remains fixed on the distant glow, lost in the silent, heavy contemplation of his solitary burden. Agent Walker enters the director's office, her face a mask of trauma from the Vancouver incident. Her footsteps echo across the polished floor, each step a heavy reminder of past horrors. The lingering trauma is etched into every line of her face, a silent testament to her ordeal. Her voice, strained with urgency, pierces the silence. What do we do now, Director? In the FBI director's office, Fleming turns, his gaze burning with an intense, troubled concern. His brow furrows deeply, a silent testament to the gravity of the unfolding situation. He declares, "We observe, we learn." His voice drops, "And we try to understand the implications." He finishes with a chilling thought, "Of a child who can summon fire from the heavens." Simon sits by his window, his gaze drawn to the vast, star-dusted canvas of the night sky, a silent observer of cosmic wonders. An almost imperceptible, subtle aura emanates from him, a faint glow hinting at hidden depths and ancient knowledge. His face is a mask of profound serenity, each feature sculpted by an inner peace that transcends earthly concerns. He appears to hold the universe's most guarded secrets within him, his calm demeanor a testament to untold wisdom. Sarah enters Simon's bedroom, her face a mask of profound worry, the dim light casting long shadows. She watches him for a moment, her gaze filled with a mother's silent anguish and concern. Approaching with cautious, hesitant steps, she moves through the quiet, anxious space. A hand, gentle and trembling with unspoken fears, rests softly on Simon's shoulder. In the quiet bedroom, Simon turns to face her, his gaze intense. His deep brown eyes hold an unfathomable depth, a silent story within. A small, knowing smile plays on his lips, hinting at hidden thoughts. Sarah's voice is soft, filled with concern. "Are you all right, sweetie?" In Simon's bedroom, the bedside lamp casts a soft, unsettling glow on his impassive face, revealing nothing. Sarah recoils, a flicker of unease crossing her features as Simon's words pierce the quiet air. His gaze unwavering, Simon utters with chilling resolve, "I am merely doing what is necessary, Mother." The unexpected depth of his declaration hangs heavy, a palpable tension filling the space between them. Sarah's eyes betray a profound disquiet, a silent struggle against the implications of his cold resolve. A frantic montage of world news flashes, each image a fleeting blur of sensationalism and fear designed to incite panic. Bold, alarming text screams across the screen. Vancouver, miracle, child, or Didi. Another headline quickly replaces it, equally unsettling. The Hirsch enigma, threat or savior. A chilling summary follows, cementing the global dread. Global panic over child's powers. The world is in an uproar, a cacophony of speculation and fear as the news cycle spirals into chaos. A whirlwind of news footage flashes, capturing the world's rapid-fire response to Simon's unsettling existence. Protesters march with defiant signs, their unheard voices echoing a global plea for answers. Individuals kneel in prayer, their faces a tapestry of fear and desperate hope, seeking solace. Heated debates erupt on screens, as talking heads passionately argue, their words a cacophony of confusion. Scientists, brows furrowed and baffled, appear on panel discussions, their expertise no match for the unknown. The imposing FBI headquarters stands under the day's light, a monolith now throbbing with urgent, palpable energy. Vehicles, both clandestine and official, surge in and out of the bustling driveways, a relentless tide of activity. Agents, their faces etched with grim resolve, move with a desperate urgency, their steps quick and purposeful. The automatic doors hiss open and shut, a ceaseless rhythm accompanying the hurried ingress and egress of federal agents. The entire building vibrates with an intense, new purpose, a silent hum of critical operations within its stone facade. A palpable energy radiates from the very stones, hinting at a crisis unfolding within the heart of the agency. Agent Walker strides down the busy FBI corridor, her gaze fixed and unwavering. Other agents blur past, their hushed conversations a background hum to her determined march. Faces turn as she passes, a mix of respect and apprehension etched in their expressions. She moves with an undeniable purpose, a force of nature navigating the bureaucratic labyrinth. In the FBI director's office, Director Fleming stands before a vast world map, his finger tracing a line across a continent. He turns, his gaze resolute, a heavy truth weighing on his expression. The world suspects, and they are right. Simon Hirsch is indeed beyond human understanding, he declares, his voice filled with a chilling certainty. The camera slowly pulls back, leaving Director Fleming in profound thought, the weight of his words hanging in the air. 8:30 in the morning. The sunlight cut across the hotel room. But for Dan and Jacob, the day began with a sharp, immediate spike of adrenaline. The mission from the night before hung in the air like static. They did not speak. They did not need to. A single glance between them confirmed the shared, unspoken question. Were they still safe? They moved toward the door of the adjacent room, their footsteps muffled by the carpet. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot. He pushed the door open, just an inch, then wider. The room was dim, the curtains drawn tight against the morning glare. They scanned the beds, their breathing shallow and jagged. Then, they saw them. Sarah and Simon were there, motionless under the blankets. The sight hit them with the force of a physical blow, draining the tension from their shoulders. They were alive. They were breathing. At 10 o'clock, the silence of the room broke. Simon stirred, his eyes snapping open with a clarity that seemed at odds with the morning light. He looked at Sarah, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face. Sarah blinked, shaking off the remnants of sleep, and returned the grin. The tension of the previous night seemed to evaporate in the face of simple human hunger. Simon's stomach gave a sharp, audible rumble, and he laughed. Sarah reached for the phone, placing a room service order with practiced efficiency. Moments later, A sharp knock at the door signaled the arrival of the staff. They wheeled in a cart laden with food, the steam rising in swirls against the cool air of the suite. Simon and Sarah moved toward the table, their eyes tracing the spread as if it were a feast from another world. They tipped the steward and dove into the meal. 10 minutes later, another knock echoed through the suite. This time, it was the rest of the family. Lily rushed in, a whirlwind of energy, pulling Simon into a tight embrace. The room filled with the sound of plates clattering, warm greetings, and the sudden, jarring normalcy of a family breakfast, effectively masking the shadows that still lingered. The laughter faded as Jacob set his coffee cup down with a sharp click against the table. He leaned forward, his gaze locked on Sarah. "So, what happened? And why are we all here in Washington?" The room grew heavy. Sarah stood, moving to the center of the space, her hands clasped tightly. She took a long, steadying breath. "This is top secret," she began, her voice low and precise. She spoke for several minutes, detailing the events of the previous night, while carefully navigating the boundaries of what she could reveal. As she spoke, the room seemed to shrink. The family sat frozen, their breakfast forgotten. Dan's hand hovered midair, his expression shifting from curiosity to a profound, hollow disbelief. Lily stopped moving, her eyes wide as she processed the impossible nature of the account. It was as if the walls of the hotel suite had dissolved. When Sarah finally stopped, the silence that followed was absolute. No one moved, no one spoke. They looked at each other, then back at Sarah. The heavy air in the suite remained, thick with the echoes of Sarah's words. Dan finally broke the stillness, his voice raspy as he asked about their future in Washington. Sarah shrugged, her uncertainty mirroring the confusion etched onto every face in the room. The usual noise and motion of the family had vanished, replaced by a tense, watchful quiet. Eric, who had been the loudest among them only moments before, sat motionless. He did not pace, he did not joke. His gaze remained fixed on Simon, who sat quietly near the window. The boisterous energy that usually defined Eric had completely drained away, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost reverent. He reached out, his hand coming to rest firmly on Simon's shoulder. Instead, his eyes held a deep, quiet awe, as if he were seeing his little brother for the first time. The silence in the suite was absolute, until the telephone on the side table erupted with a sharp, piercing ring. Every head in the room snapped toward the sound. Dan, sitting closest to the receiver, reached out and picked it up. His voice was cautious as he answered. A brief, one-sided conversation followed, his expressions shifting from polite interest to a tight-lipped frown. He listened for a moment, then held the phone out towards Sarah. "It is Agent Walker," he said, his tone flat. Sarah took the receiver, her fingers gripping the plastic tightly. "Good morning, Agent Walker," she said, her voice steady despite the sudden tension. The room went still again as she listened to the voice on the other end, her brow furrowed, a deep line appearing between her eyes. A program? What kind of program? She paused, her gaze drifting towards Simon, who sat unaware of the shift in the room. "At noon? I see." She hung up the phone and looked at the expectant faces of her family. The air in the room had changed. "They have a schedule for Simon," she announced, her voice barely above a whisper. "They are coming to pick us up at noon." The room erupted. Jacob stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "They cannot just demand his time like this," he said, his voice sharp with frustration. "You are all exhausted. They have to let you rest." He paced the small space, his hands gesturing toward the door as if to bar it against the outside world. Dan joined him, his face tight with concern. "I agree," Dan added, stepping toward Sarah. "They are building too much on Simon. They treat him like a machine, but he is a small child. He needs a playground, a school, a normal life, not a government schedule." The practical, measured tone of the family had vanished, replaced by a desperate need to shield the boy from the weight of the state. David's mother interjected, her voice cutting through the rising volume. I do not think they care about our opinions, she said, her tone heavy with the reality of their situation. Sarah sighed, the sound lost in the ongoing protest. She looked at her father, her expression softening as she tried to bridge the gap between his fear and their reality. Let us see what today brings, she said, raising a hand to quiet the room. I promise I will ask the pertinent questions. The room fell into a strained, heavy silence. Dan stood by the window, his gaze fixed on the street below, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. Sarah walked over to him, placing a hand on his arm to draw his attention. Dad, she said, her voice low and steady. I know what they are doing. I see the weight they are placing on his shoulders. She looked towards Simon, who was busy gathering his things. I promise you, I will ask the pertinent questions today. I will not let them treat him like a tool without a fight. Dan turned, his eyes searching hers for a flicker of certainty. He nodded once, a brief, sharp movement that acknowledged the reality they were both trapped in. The rest of the family began to gather their belongings, the air thick with unspoken fears. They filed out of the room, their footsteps echoing in the hallway. Sarah stood in the center of the room, the sudden quiet pressing in on her. She turned to Simon, who was waiting by the door. The time for speculation was over. The time for action had arrived. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and prepared to face whatever the government had waiting. A sharp, rhythmic knock echoed against the door, cutting through the silence of the room. She moved to the adjacent room and knocked, her hand lingering on the wood for a moment. Lily opened the door, her face lighting up at the sight of her mother. Mommy, you are all dressed, Lily said, stepping into the hallway. Can I go with you? Sarah knelt, bringing herself to eye level with her daughter. She placed her hands on Lily's shoulders. Only Simon and I are going, Sarah explained, her voice tight. You will stay here with Eric and your grandparents. Hi. Sarah pulled her into a brief, firm embrace, then stood up, forcing herself to turn away. She took Simon's hand. Simon emerged from the room, his movements precise and deliberate. He stood perfectly still, his shoulders squared and his chin held at an angle that suggested a maturity far beyond his years. Sarah watched him, a flicker of unease crossing her face as she realized the boy standing before her was not the child she had tucked into bed only hours before. He projected an aura of absolute readiness, his gaze steady and unblinking as he scanned the hallway. Agent Walker stepped forward, his professional mask slipping for a fraction of a second as he took in the boy's demeanor. How are you this morning, Simon? The agent asked, his voice losing its usual clipped edge. Simon met his eyes without hesitation. I am prepared, Agent Walker. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of what was to come. Simon did not fidget, nor did he look toward the exit with impatience. Sarah reached out to take his hand, but he was already moving toward the elevator, his stride rhythmic and purposeful. The hotel lobby was quiet, the air thick with the scent of floor wax and stale coffee. They walked in a tight formation, Agent Walker leading the way with a hand hovering near his side. Outside, the black Cadillac waited at the curb, its engine idling with a low, rhythmic thrum that vibrated through the pavement. The driver held the rear door open, a silent sentinel in the morning light. Sarah stepped into the vehicle, the leather seats cool and firm against her skin. Simon followed, sliding into the center with a fluid, practiced grace that seemed entirely out of place for a child. Agent Walker climbed into the front passenger seat, the heavy door thudding shut with a finality that echoed in the small space. The interior was dim, the windows tinted to obscure the world outside. As the car pulled away from the curb, the city blurred into a smear of gray and concrete. No music played. No one spoke. The silence inside the car was absolute, a heavy, suffocating weight that pressed against them. Sarah leaned forward, her voice cutting through the mechanical hum of the engine. Agent Walker, where are we going? What is this for? We are headed to the Library of Congress, she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. It has been closed to the public for a private summit. He paused, letting the weight of the location sink into the small space. The greatest minds in the country have gathered there. Scientists from every discipline, medicine, nuclear physics, mathematics, and theology are waiting. Sarah felt the air in the car grow thin. "What will they do to him?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "They will evaluate the extent of his knowledge," Walker replied. Sarah looked at Simon. The car turned a corner, the massive stone facade of the library rising into view. They were no longer just passengers. Sarah stared at the passing city, her mind racing to process the implications. "Why him?" she asked, her voice steadying despite the tremor in her hands. He tapped the steering wheel, his eyes scanning the road. "We are currently navigating a diplomatic nightmare. The Canadian Secret Service is demanding answers we cannot provide. They are convinced a weapon was deployed, but there is no weapon on Earth that matches the signature of what occurred." Sarah felt a cold knot tighten in her chest. "And what are you telling them?" she pressed. Walker offered a thin, humorless smile. "We tell them nothing. We deny, we deflect, and we let them chase shadows. The world is not ready to understand the mechanics of what your son can do." He glanced at Simon, who remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Mr. Fleming and Mr. Tanner have staked their reputations on this summit. They need to quantify the unquantifiable." The car slowed as they approached the perimeter of the library. Walker leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, final tone. "This is not just an assessment, Sarah. It is the protection of a secret that could reshape the global balance of power." The Cadillac glided to a halt before the towering stone structure. A large, printed sign hung over the main entrance, claiming the library was closed for maintenance. Yet the perimeter told a different story. Armed guards stood at every point of entry, their eyes scanning the street with mechanical precision. Sarah stepped out, the cool air of the city hitting her as she looked up at the massive, imposing facade. Agent Walker led them toward the Great Hall, where the atmosphere shifted from public space to a fortified bunker. A heavy desk blocked the path, manned by two men in dark suits who flanked three security officers. Metal detectors hummed with a low, constant frequency, the only sound in the cavernous space. Walker produced his badge, his movements practiced and efficient. The men in suits exchanged a silent nod, their attention shifting briefly to Simon before they signaled the guards to clear the way. They were handed 3 passes, the plastic cards feeling cold and heavy in Sarah's palm. As they stepped through the detectors, the weight of the security measures became undeniable. They were no longer in a library. They were inside a controlled environment designed to contain a force the world could not comprehend. The doors behind them sealed shut, cutting off the last remnants of the outside world. They moved forward into the heart of the building, the sound of their own footsteps echoing against the marble floors. The grand hallway stretched ahead, a cavernous expanse of stone and shadow that seemed to swallow their presence. Every turn revealed more of the structure, yet the space remained devoid of ordinary life. There were no tourists, no researchers, only the cold, polished surfaces of a monument that had been repurposed for a singular, hidden objective. As they navigated the labyrinthine corridors, the atmosphere began to change. A low, rhythmic hum of voices drifted from somewhere ahead, vibrating through the air like a distant storm. It was not a single conversation, but a dense, layered murmur of dozens of people speaking at once. Sarah paused, her hand hovering near her side, as the sound grew in intensity. It was the sound of anticipation, a collective focus that felt heavy and suffocating. Agent Walker did not slow his pace, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. He knew what waited behind the walls. The murmurs became sharper. They reached the end of the corridor, where a set of heavy double doors stood as the final barrier. A small plaque identified the space as a projection room, but the sound leaking through the frame suggested something far more significant. The murmur from the other side had sharpened into a rhythmic, low-frequency hum of hundreds of voices, a collective pressure that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. Sarah stopped, her breath hitching in her throat. She felt the sudden, sharp reality of the situation. the weight of the unknown pressing against her chest like a physical force. She looked down at her hands, then at the boy standing beside her, realizing that the life they had known was already a distant memory. The air in the hallway felt thin, charged with a static intensity that made the skin on her arms prickle. Agent Walker placed a hand on the door handle, his expression unreadable. The heavy doors swung inward, revealing a tiered space packed with bodies. The transition was instantaneous. The roar of conversation, which had been a constant, vibrating pressure in the hallway, died the moment they crossed the threshold. It did not fade. It was severed. 130 people sat in the dim light, their faces turned toward the entrance with a singular, predatory intensity. Scientists, professors, and engineers sat in rows that stretched upward into the shadows, but their focus was not on the adults. Every eye in the room locked onto the boy. The silence was absolute, heavy enough to feel against the skin. It was a vacuum of sound where even the act of breathing felt like a disruption. Sarah stepped forward, her boots clicking against the floor, and the sound was amplified by the stillness. She felt the weight of those collective gazes, a physical pressure that seemed to pin them in place at the doorway. No one moved, no one whispered. The air in the room was stagnant, thick with the expectation of something impossible. They were no longer in a library. They were in the center of a target, all waiting for a single movement. The boy stood perfectly still, his presence the only thing anchoring the room. Simon did not hesitate. As the silence deepened, he stepped forward, his pace rhythmic and steady against the polished floor. He ignored the rows of observers, his gaze fixed on the lower level where the two men waited. Sarah followed, but she felt like a ghost in the wake of his movement. The boy moved with a fluidity that defied his age, navigating the aisle as if he were walking through his own living room. Every head in the theater tracked his progress, a sea of eyes following his path. He reached the center, where the two directors stood, and stopped. He did not look for guidance or reassurance. Instead, he extended a hand to each of them in turn, his movements precise and deliberate. The directors leaned in, their expressions shifting from professional curiosity to something akin to genuine respect as they shook his hand. Simon turned then, facing the massive assembly. He was no longer just a subject of study, but the focal point of the entire room, waiting for the first word to be spoken. Fleming stepped forward, his movement breaking the tension that had held the room in a vice. He raised his hands, palms toward the assembly, and his voice carried clearly through the space. He spoke with the weight of authority, his words measured and precise. He gestured toward the boy, standing at the center of the stage. The assembly responded instantly. A wave of sound erupted, a sudden, thunderous applause that filled the theater. Sarah sat in the third row, her hands gripped tightly in her lap. She watched the scene unfold, her pulse quickening with every clap. The pride she felt was sharp, but it was shadowed by a cold, creeping dread that settled in her chest. She saw her son standing there, completely unmoved. By the volume, his expression unreadable. He looked toward the microphone, his movements calm and deliberate. The applause began to taper off. Simon brought the microphone to his lips, his movement fluid and practiced. He did not look at the directors or the audience for cues. He spoke, and his voice carried a resonance that seemed to fill every corner of the theater. "Hi, everyone. My name is Simon David Hirsch." The room went cold. Sarah felt the air leave her lungs in a sharp, involuntary gasp. She gripped the armrests of her seat, her knuckles turning white. The name hung in the air, a jarring intrusion that defied the logic of the boy standing before them. Around her, the assembly shifted. Scientists leaned forward, their pens hovering over notebooks, their expressions hardening into masks of intense scrutiny. Simon did not notice the ripple of shock. He continued, his tone steady and devoid of hesitation. "I am 8 years old and was born in Chicago, Illinois. I lost my father before I was born. He was murdered." He spoke of the tragedy with a clinical detachment that made the room feel smaller. Sarah watched him, her heart hammering against her ribs. She saw the boy she raised, yet the person speaking was someone else entirely. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy with the weight of what had just been spoken. No one moved. Fleming cleared his throat, his eyes darting toward the assembly as he gestured for the proceedings to continue. A man in his 50s stood up in the front row, his movements stiff and deliberate. He held a small notepad, but he did not look at it. He looked directly at the boy. "Hi, Simon," the man began, his voice steady despite the tension. "I read that you were born dead and that you were revived." Sarah felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She watched her son, waiting for a child's confusion, but none came. Simon turned his head toward the speaker, his expression unblinking. He took a breath, and the sound was amplified by the microphone. "Well, I remember everything," Simon replied. "I remember the day I was murdered and all the happenings since then." The boy stood at the center of the stage, his posture rigid and his gaze fixed on the back wall of the theater. "My soul incorporated into my dead son's body," he stated, the words cutting through the room like a blade. He did not blink. He continued to explain the mechanics of his return, his voice devoid of any childish inflection. "I remember my stay in heaven for so many months. The moment they found out that the baby had no soul, I was projected like a laser beam into my own lifeless son's body." A collective gasp rippled through the rows of chairs, followed by a silence so absolute it felt physical. Scientists who had spent their lives studying the tangible world sat frozen, their pens dropped or forgotten in their hands. The air in the room grew heavy, saturated with the impossibility of what they had just heard. Sarah felt her pulse thrumming in her ears, her eyes locked on the small figure. The entire assembly seemed to be holding its breath, caught in the wake of a truth that defied every law of physics they had come to defend. The silence held, a heavy blanket over the rows of experts. Then, a woman in the second row rose. She did not look at her colleagues. Her eyes were fixed on the boy. "What is heaven, or paradise, like?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper in the vast room. Simon shifted his weight, his hands resting lightly on the microphone stand. He did not hesitate. "Paradise is the optimum of a soul's trek," he began, his tone clinical, yet strangely evocative. "The purpose of our various reincarnations is to complete the cycle of cleansing our souls." He paused, letting the words settle. "Understanding that the soul is positive energy in this material world and in paradise, the final destination is to incorporate into the endless light of the Creator, good Almighty." A ripple of movement passed through the crowd as pens finally began to scratch against paper. Simon's gaze swept across the room, unblinking. "Not so in hell, where the soul turns to negative energy," he added, his voice dropping an octave. "We will probably discuss that later." Simon did not pause. He leaned into the microphone, his voice steady and rhythmic. "I remember leaving this world through a tunnel of light. But before that, during the first 7 days of my demise, I hovered between worlds." He looked toward the front row, his expression unreadable. "I could see and hear everything going on at my house and in the cemetery. I could see, hear, and feel my family's pain and sorrow." A sharp intake of breath sounded from the back of the room. He continued, his tone matter-of-fact. "And at the cemetery, I met many souls waiting for the beings of light, what we call angels. Then I was to take the first gate to my right, and that is what I did." The room erupted in sudden, thunderous applause. The applause died away, but the tension in the room only sharpened. Simon remained standing, his posture unchanged as the echoes of the crowd vanished into the high, vaulted ceiling. He waited for the next question, but the assembly seemed paralyzed by his previous account. He took the initiative, his voice cutting through the stillness. "My entire life played back to me like a movie," he said, his eyes scanning the rows of silent, attentive faces. "There was nothing I could hide from those beings. At that moment, you are an open book." He paused, letting the weight of the statement sink into the minds of the scientists and doctors before him. Every thought, every hidden motive, every secret you have ever kept, it is all laid bare before the divine instructors. A man in the front row leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of his seat until his knuckles turned white. Simon's expression remained calm, almost detached. You cannot lie to the light. You cannot conceal your nature. When the soul stands before the beings of light, the truth is not just spoken. It is the only thing that exists. The room was so quiet that the hum of the ventilation system sounded like a roar. No one moved. No one dared to break the spell. Simon shifted his weight, his eyes finding Sarah in the third row before returning to the assembly. You speak of nervous breakdowns and psychological trauma, he said, his voice steady. But what you call a breakdown, I call a bridge. He recounted the days following his death, when his presence lingered in the family home. My family was drowning in sorrow, yet Lily was the only one who could hear me. He paused, letting the implications settle over the room. While the doctors were diagnosing her with a collapse of the mind, she was actually holding a conversation with my soul. She did not see a ghost. She saw her brother. He looked at the scientists, his expression challenging their clinical definitions. She was the only one whose spirit was open enough to perceive the frequency I was vibrating on. Her pain was not a symptom of illness, but a reaction to the barrier between our worlds thinning. The room remained frozen. Simon stood motionless, waiting for the next question. His connection to his sister now an established, undeniable fact. Simon turned his gaze toward the back of the room, as if looking through the walls at a destination only he could see. The tunnel was not a path to be walked, he explained, his voice rhythmic and calm. It was a descent into an intensity that stripped away everything material. You go down until the light from the end. The endless light becomes so brilliant, it is physically unbearable. He paused, the silence in the room deepening. That is when you know you have reached the threshold. He described the moment of decision. I was instructed to take the first gate to my right, and I did. Ha! As he spoke, the air in the room seemed to thin. The gate opened into a space that defied all human measurement. It was paradise at my level of purity. There was no noise, no friction, no struggle, only a profound, absolute peace that filled every corner of my being. He looked back at the assembly, his eyes clear. I joined other souls there, all vibrating at that same frequency of stillness. The scientists sat motionless, their pens hovering over notebooks, their questions forgotten in the wake of his description. The room felt suspended. The silence in the projection room deepened until it felt heavy, pressing against the walls. For the first time, the assembly of the greatest minds in the country did not look like experts. They looked like children hearing a story they could not comprehend. A lead physicist in the front row slowly lowered his tablet, his hand trembling slightly. He did not look at his notes. He looked at Simon. Across the room, a renowned neurologist sat with her mouth slightly parted, her pen having slipped from her fingers to the floor. Forgotten. The logic that had governed their careers, the laws of thermodynamics, the boundaries of biology, the certainty of death had been dismantled in a few sentences. They were not just listening to a child. They were witnessing the impossible. Fleming and Tanner exchanged a brief, sharp glance, their own composure strained. No one moved to ask the next question. The list of speakers, once a rigid guide for the conference, had become meaningless. Sarah sat in the third row, her hands resting quietly in her lap. She watched the faces of the most powerful thinkers in the world, and saw the exact moment their certainty dissolved. They were no longer looking for data or proof. He stood at the center of the room, calm and anchored, as if he were simply discussing the weather rather than the architecture of the afterlife. They were the first steps on a long, winding road that would never lead back to the quiet life they once held. The fear that had gripped her earlier began to fade, replaced by a cold, clear understanding. This was their new world. Simon was the key, and she was the witness to a transformation that would ripple far beyond these walls. She took a steadying breath, feeling the weight of the future. When the boy finally spoke, the sound that emerged from his mouth sent a ripple of visible shock through the front rows. It was not the voice of a child. It was the voice of David. The resonance of it, deep and unmistakably familiar to those who knew the truth, filled every corner of the auditorium. Yet, the wisdom pouring forth was something entirely new. Something that defied the logic of every brilliant mind gathered there. The only sound remaining in the vast space was the collective, rhythmic breathing of hundreds of people caught in a moment of pure, unadulterated awe. No one dared to shift in their chairs. The collective gaze of the world's most brilliant minds remained locked on the boy, their expressions caught between disbelief and a dawning, terrifying realization. Then, the spell began to fray at the edges. She cleared her throat, but the sound was thin, barely audible. She took a breath, steadied her trembling frame, and looked directly at Simon. "How many gates or levels of paradise are there?" she asked, her eyes searching the boy's face for a sign of hesitation. "And where exactly is paradise?" Simon did not pause to gather his thoughts. His response came with the fluid precision of a master architect describing a blueprint. And each of those 10 levels is further subdivided into 10 more, extending infinitely. A murmur rippled through the hall, a sound of frantic scribbling. Simon continued, his gaze steady. When a person is born, their soul possesses a unique level or degree of purity of positive energy. Upon their departure from our material world, this inherent level of purity acts as a compass, determining which specific level of paradise that soul will ascend to. He leaned forward, his small frame projecting an authority that silenced the room once more. As for where heaven resides, if the universe were to be envisioned as a human body, paradise would be its brain. The scientists sat frozen, their faces etched with a mix of confusion and profound fascination. They were trying to map a new reality. Naturally, there is a minimum threshold of positive energy a departing soul must possess to be reincarnated as a human being, he stated. The room grew colder, the earlier fascination replaced by a palpable, nervous tension. He held up 4 fingers, ticking them off one by one. Souls can be reincarnated into 4 distinct types of existence: humans, animals, plants, and even the inanimate, such as stone, dust, minerals, and other earthly materials. A pen dropped in the back of the hall, the clatter sharp and jarring against the sudden stillness. Simon continued, his voice devoid of judgment, as if he were reciting a simple chemical equation. Just as the 4 dimensions are subdivided, each of these types of existence also contains numerous levels within them. A thunderous round of applause shattered the heavy silence, echoing off the high ceiling. Cameras whirred and flashed, capturing the moment as the audience surged with renewed, frantic energy. An older gentleman with a shock of white hair stood, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his glasses. "Do you happen to know the true size of the universe?" he asked, his voice thin against the lingering roar of the crowd. Simon waited for the room to settle, his gaze sweeping the rows of expectant faces. To truly grasp the immense scale of the universe, let us continue to employ the metaphor of the human body, he began. If the universe is a human body, then our galaxy, the Milky Way, is but a single atom within that body. Our sun is a proton, and the planets are the neutrons, and all the other particles contained within that atom. The electrons, or leptons, in this analogy, would be the stars, which function as gluons, binding our galaxy together. He gestured toward the ceiling, his small hand tracing an invisible arc. With this framework, calculating the actual size of the universe becomes far less complicated. The room fell into a stunned, breathless quiet. A woman stood, her question building on the previous topic. Staying on the same subject, she began, "What surrounds the universe?" Simon's gaze swept across the expectant faces before him, his expression unreadable. "What surrounds the universe," he explained, "is the endless light, or the very essence of the Creator, pure, intelligent energy." He paused, letting the words hang in the stagnant air of the hall. His essence permeates everything. Nothing can come into being without his essence. He raised a hand, gesturing as if holding an invisible, delicate object. A new galaxy, for instance, cannot form without that energy. It would be akin to a baby born without a soul, stillborn. Both the baby and the galaxy require a derivation of the Creator's essence. The baby needs a soul, and the galaxy needs that fundamental energy. In a profound sense, the birth of a baby is analogous to the coming into existence of a galaxy. The scientists shifted in their seats, the sound of fabric rubbing against wood echoing loudly. They looked at one another, their faces marked by a mixture of confusion and dawning realization. The boundary between the biological and the cosmic had been erased, leaving them to contemplate a universe that was not merely matter, but a living, breathing extension of a singular, intelligent source. A woman stood, her question cutting through the lingering silence. Staying on the same subject, she began. What exactly are black holes? Simon's gaze swept across the expectant faces before him. For you all to comprehend black holes, he continued, I will persist in using the body as a simple comparison. It is sufficient to explore the human body to better understand our complex universe. He held up a hand, fingers splayed to emphasize the point. Black holes are, in essence, the digestive apparatus of the universe. The room went deathly quiet, the sound of a distant air vent suddenly audible. Anything that passes through them does not vanish, he clarified, his voice calm and precise. It merely transitions to a different dimension, much as our stomachs convert food into positive or negative energies that are then transferred to our bloodstream and subsequently to the necessary parts of our bodies. He paused, letting the implications settle. The scientists sat frozen, their pens hovering over notebooks, struggling to reconcile the violent reputation of black holes with this new model. Fleming rose from his chair, his movement drawing every eye in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced, his voice cutting through the intellectual fervor. Let's take a well-deserved break and have lunch. I am certain that everyone is hungry, especially Simon. We will reconvene here in precisely 1 hour. The tension in the hall broke as the assembly began to stir. Sarah, Simon, Fleming, Walker, and Tanner exited the hall together, moving toward a nearby restaurant. Once seated, Tanner turned his attention to Simon, his expression marked by genuine shock. Simon, he began, not many people can impress me, but you, without a doubt, have. This is the very first time anyone has ever returned to life and shared with us everything the world has ever yearned to know about what transpires after death. Fleming nodded, leaning forward to emphasize his point. I wholeheartedly concur. You have rendered the greatest minds speechless. You are, without question, our most invaluable asset. Simon remained composed, his reaction neutral, but the weight of these words struck Sarah with force. She watched the organizers, a surge of pride rising. They finished their meal in relative quiet, the gravity of the morning's revelations lingering between them as they prepared to return to the conference. The conference hall was no longer the silent, orderly space it had been that morning. Even before the organizers returned, the room was buzzing with a frantic, discordant energy. Small groups of scientists had formed near the back rows and along the walls, their voices rising and falling in sharp, jagged bursts of debate. Some stood with their arms crossed, staring intently at their own notes as if searching for a flaw in the logic they had recorded. Others paced the aisles, gesturing wildly as they argued over the implications of a four-dimensional paradise. The air felt heavy, charged with the friction of brilliant minds struggling to dismantle their own life's work. Old hierarchies seemed to dissolve in the face of the new, unsettling reality Simon had presented. A physicist tapped his pen against a table with rhythmic, nervous intensity, while a biologist nearby shook his head, his face etched with a mix of frustration and profound confusion. The fundamental convictions that had anchored their careers for decades were being discarded in real time, replaced by a terrifying, expansive uncertainty. As Simon and the organizers approached the front, The groups did not immediately disperse, their heated exchanges continuing until the very last second. Tanner's voice boomed across the hall, cutting through the lingering debates. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will recommence in 5 minutes. Please take your seats." The effect was immediate. The scattered groups of scientists broke apart, moving with hurried purpose toward their chairs. Within moments, a profound, heavy silence settled over the room, replacing the earlier roar of intellectual friction. As Simon walked toward the podium, the entire assembly rose as one, a spontaneous standing ovation rippling through the rows. The applause was rhythmic and intense, a physical manifestation of their collective need for more answers. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a new weight, sharper and more direct. "I perceive that you now have even more questions than before," he began. "I presented these answers in a simplified manner, not as a sign of disrespect, but so that we would have sufficient time to address all your inquiries." Fleming gestured toward the audience. "Let us resume the questions. You have spoken extensively about heaven," he stated, his voice echoing in the quiet hall. "But what about hell? What is it like, and where is it located?" The air in the room seemed to thin. Simon's expression hardened, his features tightening into a grim mask. He lowered his gaze, his shoulders slumping slightly, and when he spoke, his voice was stripped of its earlier lighter cadence. It was somber, heavy, with a cold finality. "Oh, hell," he began. "It is, and always will be, the primary source of our problems. Greed, lust, and selfishness are the very forces that allow hell to exist." He paused, letting the words hang in the stagnant air. "Hell is, in fact, an earthly location only." The audience sat motionless. Pens hovered over notebooks, forgotten. Simon looked up, his eyes scanning the room as he continued. "When we are born, our souls arrive with a specific degree of purity. Think of it as a point system. A new soul starts with a positive value, perhaps 1,250 points. Throughout each reincarnation, you either gain or lose those points." He paused, his voice steady. "To return as a human, you need at least 1,000 points. To be an animal, 500. Even a plant requires some positive energy. But if you accumulate negative points, you are reincarnated as a mineral. This is the only level from which there is no return." He leaned forward, his hands resting on the podium. "For such an individual, the body becomes everything. The essence remains with the physical form until the ground absorbs it. It takes thousands of years, but eventually, that body transforms into fuel. The essence then flows toward the magma at the Earth's core. As the saying goes, this person burns in hell. You must understand, the negative energy that constituted this individual retains full awareness of their situation. Time and distance are merely human notions, and for them, this process is an eternal, conscious state." He stopped, letting the chilling reality of his words settle over the hall. The scientists sat frozen, their pens motionless against their notebooks, the air thick with the weight of the revelation. The silence in the hall was not merely an absence of sound, it was a physical weight. Every person in the room remained motionless, their eyes fixed on the podium, yet their gazes seemed to pass through Simon, lost in the implications of what they had just heard. A few scientists gripped their pens so tightly their knuckles turned white, while others simply stared at their notebooks, the pages filled with notes that now felt like relics of a dead era. The fundamental conviction that death was an end, or a transition to a peaceful void, had been dismantled. They were no longer the masters of their own intellectual domain. When a ripple of applause finally started, it was thin and hesitant, lacking the rhythmic, thunderous energy that had defined the earlier sessions. It died out almost as quickly as it had begun, leaving the room in a hollow, uncomfortable stillness. They looked at one another, but no one spoke. The air felt heavy, as if the oxygen itself had been replaced by a lingering, cold dread. Fleming watched the room, his jaw set, observing the visible collapse of their collective composure. The scientists had arrived as seekers of truth, but they were now retreating into a defensive, stunned silence, forced to confront the reality that their entire understanding of existence had been fundamentally and, perhaps, irrevocably shattered. A young woman rose, her eyes searching Simon's face. What climatic dangers must we face in the coming decades? Is the damage reversible? Just as a human body requires rest, the Earth needs its seventh-year cycle to re-energize. We have ignored this. We treat the planet like a battery that never needs to recharge, and it is failing. He gestured toward the room, his voice cutting through the heavy air. We are on a trajectory toward total self-destruction within 50 to 100 years. If the global community does not execute a complete reversal of its current path, civilization will cease to exist. We will regress to the Stone Age, and within a millennium, the human race will vanish entirely. Simon's words acted like a physical weight, pressing down on the assembly. The silence that followed was not one of confusion, but of absolute, paralyzing dread. Simon did not pause to let the dread settle. When I speak of negativity, I mean the inevitable. Humans will instigate a nuclear war that triggers a devastating domino effect. A tiny fraction of the world's population will be the architects of this nuclear holocaust. He scanned the room, his gaze locking onto the faces of the most powerful minds. The world turns a blind eye. People believe they are immune, that the fire will not reach their doorstep. They are wrong. He pointed a finger toward the center of the hall, his voice rising with a sharp, cutting intensity. This war is not a distant possibility. It is the logical conclusion of the path we have chosen. They exploit the global dependency on resources to hold nations hostage, effectively purchasing the silence of those who should be acting. The scientists shifted in their seats, the sound of fabric against wood echoing like gunfire. Some leaned forward, their hands trembling, while others recoiled as if physically struck. The horror was no longer theoretical. It was a countdown, and for the first time, they understood that their own inaction was the fuel for the coming fire. Simon turned his focus to the source of the decay. This fuel, in itself, is a destroyer. It represents the most negative energy, originating from hell, embodying the black essence of souls with poor intelligent energy. He paced the small stage, his movements sharp. This energy is constantly being released, poisoning our atmosphere and the ozone layer. While fossil fuels undeniably aided our evolution, we have become addicted. Over decades, we failed to discover alternative energies, and now, this fuel is a drug to the world's economy. He stopped, his gaze piercing. This infernal poison and our dependency on it are now governing the world. Hell is, in essence, ruling the world. The room went deathly quiet. The scientists sat frozen, the weight of his words sinking in. They had built their entire civilization on this foundation, and now they were forced to see it as a toxic tether to the abyss. Faces that had been curious were now pale, etched with profound sadness and the dawning realization of their own complicity. Simon lowered his voice, the intensity of his tone grounding the room in a cold, physical reality. Beyond the contamination of our air, we are committing a deeper, irreversible error. We are starving the Earth's core. Every extraction of energy means we cease to feed the magma that sustains our planet's internal fire. He gestured to the floor beneath them as if the ground itself were already turning brittle. In a few decades, that magma will cool and die. The Earth will lose its internal heat, and with it, the stability of its gravity. It will shift out of its place in the solar system, drifting away from the sun into the dark, empty reaches of space. He paused, letting the image of a wandering, dead rock take hold. Once this occurs, life will become non-existent. The oceans will freeze solid. The atmosphere will dissipate into the void. The world will become a silent, frozen tomb, drifting through an endless, lightless expanse. He looked at the scientists, his eyes unblinking. This is not a metaphor. It is the physical trajectory of a planet that has been drained of its fundamental life force. When the gravity fails, the world ends. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with the weight of a dying future. The air grew heavy, thick with the weight of a future that no longer held a place for them or those they loved. Fleming, Tanner, and Walker sat motionless, their eyes fixed on the floor, their expressions etched with a profound, hollow sadness. The intellectual fervor that had fueled the morning had evaporated, replaced by the cold, biting reality of a dying world. They were no longer scientists debating theories. They were parents and grandparents staring into a void. Every person in the hall felt the same crushing realization. The knowledge they had sought had arrived, but it was a burden they were not prepared to carry. They looked at one another, seeing the same mirror of despair, the same crushing grief for the generations that would never know a world beyond the coming darkness. A young scientist stood, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. He ignored the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of the room. "How certain are you of these statements?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Is there a solution to halt this process? Everything I have described will occur with 100% certainty if the world continues under the current regime." He paused, his expression hardening. "But the answer to your second question is yes. There is a way to change the trajectory." He leaned forward, his presence commanding the entire hall. The silence that returned was no longer the silence of a funeral, but the silence of a held breath. The finality of the end had been challenged. Just past 2 o'clock, a minibus pulled up to the White House. The doors hissed open, and a group of children spilled out, their voices rising in a chorus of excitement as they followed their guides toward the hallowed halls. Standing apart from the crowd, Fleming kept his gaze locked on Simon. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, sharp whisper. "Simon, listen. Merge with the group. Find someone to talk to. Act like any other child, and do not acknowledge me. My agent is the blonde woman leading the group. If you detect anything critical, signal her with absolute discretion. I will be watching." Simon nodded once, his expression unreadable. He stepped forward, his small frame shifting into the rhythm of the other children. Within seconds, he was indistinguishable from the rest, a shadow moving among the crowd. Fleming stepped back, allowing the distance to grow. He watched the group disappear into the stone architecture. The group moved through the historic hallways, their footsteps muffled by thick carpets. Every wall held portraits that seemed to watch their progress. Finally, they reached the threshold of the Oval Office. The guide lowered her voice to a reverent whisper, explaining the significance of the room. Suddenly, 2 agents materialized on either side of the door. They stood motionless, their eyes scanning the corridor. One spoke into a concealed microphone. The air in the room grew heavy with anticipation. The guide signaled for the children to step back, creating a clear space. A moment later, the president emerged. He stopped, his gaze sweeping over the group with a practiced, warm smile. He spoke of the future and the weight of the nation, his voice steady and rhythmic, while the other children leaned forward, wide-eyed and mesmerized. Simon remained perfectly still. He did not look at the office or the staff. His eyes were locked on the president, tracking every micro-expression and shift in posture. He was not listening to the words. He was dissecting the man. To the rest of the room, he was just another child, but his focus was a blade. As the president finished his remarks and turned to leave, Simon's jaw tightened. The tour concluded with a final, brisk walk back to the waiting minibus. One by one, the children climbed aboard, their voices still buzzing with excitement about the day. A guide stood at the door, clicking a counter for every head that passed. Simon moved with the flow, his face a mask of calculated indifference. As the bus pulled away from the White House, he leaned his head against the glass, watching the city blur into a gray smear. The other children shared stories, but Simon remained silent, his gaze fixed on the horizon. His stop was the last one, a deliberate choice to ensure no one was watching. When the bus finally rolled into the empty parking lot, Fleming was already there, leaning against his sedan. Simon stepped off, The door hissed shut, and he walked straight to the car. The ride to FBI headquarters was devoid of conversation. Fleming kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Beside him, Simon sat with his hands clasped tightly, his small frame seemingly shrinking under the pressure of what he had witnessed. The city lights flickered past, casting long, shifting shadows. They pulled into the secure garage, the heavy steel door grinding shut behind them, sealing them away from the world. Inside the office, the air felt thin. Simon moved to a side room, shed his layers, and returned to face the two men. Fleming leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. He looked at the boy. "Simon, tell us, how bad is it?" Simon did not hesitate. His voice was steady, cutting through the silence of the room. "The infiltration is deep. It is total." Tanner gripped the armrests of his chair. "Who is involved?" Simon listed the names, his tone clinical. 9 people. The Secretary of State, the Chief of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, the Personal Secretary, the 2 bodyguards, the Attorney General, and the head of the Secret Service. He paused, letting the weight of the list settle. "And the President." Fleming stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "That is impossible." "How?" Simon explained the process. "They are twins. They replaced the originals at 18. They are brilliant, charismatic, and entirely loyal to the Kremlin." Walker steered the car into the flow of city traffic, her eyes locked on the rearview mirror. She saw them immediately. 3 dark sedans, maintaining a precise distance, matching every turn and lane change. Within seconds, 3 additional FBI vehicles peeled off from side streets, flanking the convoy in a tight, protective wedge. The pursuers realized they were compromised. The lead car accelerated, swerved through a red light, and vanished into an alley. The other 2 followed suit, scattering in opposite directions with calculated efficiency. Walker pulled her vehicle to the curb, the tires screeching. The threat had evaporated, but the message was clear. They were being watched. "Stay sharp," Walker muttered, her hand resting near her side. The agents in the trailing cars pulled up, their faces grim. They had seen the same maneuver. There were no coincidences in this operation. Walker shifted gears and pushed back into the lane, her grip on the wheel iron tight. She radioed ahead. "Increase the perimeter. We have been tracked." The hotel parking lot was a fortress. 8 agents stood in a perimeter, weapons ready. As Walker pulled into the designated zone, they moved in a tight protective cluster, shielding Simon from the lobby entrance to the elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing them away. When the suite door opened, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Sarah stood in the hallway, her hands trembling until she saw him. She pulled him into a desperate embrace, her relief palpable. Eric and Lily crowded around, their voices overlapping in a rush of questions. The grandparents stood back, watching the scene with quiet concern. The agents did not linger, retreating to their posts outside the room. Inside, the heavy burden of the day seemed to lift, if only for a moment. Simon looked at his mother, his shoulders finally dropping. The exhaustion hit him all at once, pulling at his eyes. He walked toward the dining table, where plates were already set. He grabbed a burger, his movements quick and ravenous. For these few minutes, he was just a boy, hungry and tired. The ring of the telephone cut through the quiet of the suite like a blade. Sarah answered, her voice soft, but her expression hardened as Fleming spoke on the other end. She looked at Simon, who was still focused on his meal, his movements mechanical and weary. "He is exhausted, Mr. Fleming," she said, her voice tight with a mother's frustration. "He is finally eating. Can he not rest for a few hours?" The reply from the other end was cold, precise, and final. 30 minutes. That was all the time the nation could afford him. She hung up the phone, the silence that followed heavier than before. She walked to the dining room, her heart sinking as she watched him. "Simon," she whispered, and the boy looked up, his eyes already shifting from the plate to the door. He did not ask why. He did not complain. He simply stood, wiping his hands. the hunger forgotten as the weight of his purpose returned to his small frame. Walker was already waiting in the hallway, his presence a grim reminder. Sarah pulled Simon into one last, desperate embrace, feeling the fragility of his body against her own. She knew, with a sudden, sharp clarity, that the boy she held was no longer just hers. He belonged to the shadows, to the secrets, and to a duty that would never let him go. She watched him walk toward the door, his steps steady and devoid of hesitation. As the suite door clicked shut, she stood in the center of the room, listening to the fading echo of his footsteps, knowing that his childhood had been sacrificed to the altar of national survival. The silence did not arrive gradually. It fell across the country like a physical weight, pinning the nation to the earth. In the heart of the capital, traffic lights cycled through their patterns for empty intersections. In the industrial hubs, assembly lines ground to a halt, the hum of machinery replaced by a hollow, ringing stillness. Every city, every town, every isolated farmhouse felt the same sudden contraction of life. People stopped where they stood. The morning commute turned into a frozen tableau of faces turned toward screens or radios, eyes fixed on nothing. There was no movement in the streets, only the sound of a collective gasp that seemed to vibrate through the very pavement. Tears were not a choice. They were a common reaction to the news that had stripped away the normalcy of the day. The pulse of the nation had slowed to a crawl, and for this singular, suspended moment, the only thing that existed was the heavy, suffocating reality. The initial paralysis eventually gave way to a persistent, hollow ache. In the quiet corners of America, the shock had settled into a permanent fixture of daily life. Curtains remained drawn against the afternoon sun, casting long gray shadows across living rooms, where the silence was broken only by the rhythmic, muffled sound of weeping. People moved through their homes like ghosts, avoiding the mirrors and the screens that still carried the images of the tragedy. In kitchens, coffee turned cold in mugs that no one reached for. In bedrooms, the sound of a stifled sob would drift through thin walls, a reminder that the grief had not dissipated. It had simply moved indoors. It was a private, quiet misery that clung to the edges of every community. Neighbors passed one another on sidewalks without making eye contact, their heads bowed, shoulders hunched against a wind that did not exist. The collective gasp had become a shallow, labored breath that defined the rhythm of every hour. There was no recovery, only the slow, agonizing process of existing within the shadow of what had been lost. Every town, from the industrial outskirts to the quietest suburbs, remained tethered to this somber reality, trapped in a cycle of mourning that refused to break. While the nation remained locked in the grip of its collective mourning, a different reality was taking shape behind reinforced glass and heavy steel doors. In the heart of the intelligence complex, the atmosphere was not one of loss, but of sharp, clinical precision. The lights here did not dim. They hummed with a steady, electric intensity that illuminated stacks of files and glowing monitors. Here, the sorrow of the streets was a distant, irrelevant frequency. The work of the intelligence community had reached a critical inflection point. Where the public saw only the void left by tragedy, those in the inner sanctum saw the successful execution of a long-term strategy. The air in the command center was cool and smelled of ozone and filtered dust. Technicians moved with a rhythmic, focused efficiency, their eyes tracking data streams that signaled the end of a major threat. It was a morning of quiet, calculated triumph. The machinery of the state had functioned exactly as intended, and the results were now being processed in real time. Fleming stood before the main console, his fingers hovering over the glass as the final confirmation scrolled across the screen. Beside him, Tanner leaned in, his weight shifting slightly as he scanned the data. The Rasputin file was closed. The objective, once a chaotic variable, had been reduced to a simple, binary state of completion. Fleming tapped a key, and the screen flickered, archiving the mission logs into the permanent record. He turned his head, catching Tanner's gaze. There was no celebration, no sudden release of tension. Instead, a slow, deliberate nod passed between them. It was the recognition of a machine functioning perfectly. Tanner reached out and adjusted a dial on the console. His movements steady, his focus absolute. They had calculated every contingency. The room remained silent, save for the low, rhythmic drone of the cooling fans. Outside these walls, the world was still morning. Fleming pulled a leather-bound ledger from the desk and made a single, sharp check mark in the margin. The ledger closed with a heavy, final thud. Fleming did not linger on the closed ledger. His eyes were already moving back to the wall of monitors, scanning the scrolling feeds that never truly stopped. Beside him, Tanner tapped a sequence into his console, pulling up a map of the city that glowed with shifting heat signatures. The Rasputin threat was neutralized, but the screen revealed a series of jagged, irregular pulses that didn't belong to the expected pattern. These were not random glitches. They were deliberate, quiet movements in the periphery of their surveillance. Fleming leaned closer, his breath hitching slightly as he traced a line of code that looped back on itself. The silence in the room changed. Tanner stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the floor, and paced the length of the command station. He stopped at the window. The shadows were not retreating. They were simply shifting shape. Every flicker on the screen was a reminder that the architecture of their control was porous. They began to recalibrate the sensors, their movements faster now, driven by the cold realization that something else was watching from the dark. The air inside Jacob Hirsch's home hung heavy and still, undisturbed by the world outside. Dust motes drifted in the thin shafts of afternoon light that pierced the drawn curtains. Hirsch sat in the center of his study, his hands resting flat on the mahogany desk, his gaze fixed on a stack of unread files. He was motionless, a statue in the dim room. Hirsch jerked back, his chair scraping violently against the floorboards. He stared at the device as if it were a coiled snake ready to strike. The phone continued its rhythmic, piercing demand, a mechanical heartbeat in the stillness of the study. The air felt thin, difficult to draw into his lungs. He watched the cord twitch with every vibration, a coiled wire tethering him to an unknown source. He reached out, his fingers brushing the cold surface of the receiver. His skin felt clammy, a stark contrast to the sharp, biting chill that seemed to radiate from the device itself. Then, a voice emerged, low, steady, and entirely devoid of warmth. It did not offer a name. It did not offer a greeting. It simply spoke a series of coordinates, followed by a date. Hirsch felt the blood drain from his face, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the receiver. The weight of the information settled into his chest, heavy and suffocating. He leaned against the mahogany desk, his legs suddenly weak, a shift in the landscape that Fleming and Tanner had not yet calculated. It was a reminder that the removal of one threat was merely the clearing of a path for the next. Hirsch closed his eyes, his breathing shallow, his mind racing through the implications. The triumph of the morning had been a fragile, temporary thing. He realized now that the vigilance required was not a task to be completed, but a state of existence. He did not ask who was calling. He did not ask for clarification, leaving him in the suffocating quiet of his study once more. He lowered the receiver slowly, his hand steady now, his gaze shifting to the window. The sun glared off the white marble of the Capitol, but the air felt heavy. Fleming stood by the window, his eyes tracking the motorcade below like a hawk. Beside him, Tanner checked his watch, the rhythmic ticking echoing in the silent room. The Rasputin threat was neutralized, but the board was still crowded with dangerous pieces. At exactly 3 p.m., the phone shattered the silence. Sarah Hirsch answered. Fleming requested Simon. Sarah Hirsch took the receiver, her knuckles white as bone. She hung up and turned to her son, her voice a mere whisper. "Agent Walker is coming for you." Simon stood, his face an unreadable mask of stone. Sarah watched him, a cold dread settling. Sarah looked into Simon's eyes, searching for a truth she feared to find. "Do you know anything about the president's death?" she asked. Simon didn't blink, his gaze steady. "I have been here for 2 days, Mom." It was a technical truth, a clever evasion that terrified her more than a lie. When the knock finally came, Agent Walker entered with 2 men in tow. They moved toward the elevator in a tense formation. As the doors slid shut, Simon leaned toward Walker. "These two have betrayed us." Before Walker could process, the 2 agents drew their weapons. 3 shots rang out. Walker crumpled to the floor, blood pooling on the cold metal tiles. One agent held up a visiophone, the screen glowing with a cruel light. On it, Lily and Eric were bound and gagged, their eyes wide with terror. Simon froze, his heart hammering. He would not trade his family's life for vengeance. They shoved him into a black van, the tires screeching against the concrete. Inside the dark cabin, they used a beeper to emit high-frequency sound waves, a piercing shriek that scrambled Simon's senses and tore at his mind. "Why?" Simon managed to gasp through the pain. The agent laughed. 100 million reasons, kid. Money makes the world spin." They drove for 25 minutes, the city blurring past. They arrived at the Iranian embassy as the sky turned an unnatural, bruised purple. The agents, sensing the shift, dragged Simon inside the sovereign walls. They demanded their final payment, their fingers dancing over a laptop. Then, they fled, leaving Simon trapped in a high-voltage cage. The cage was narrow, a masterpiece of cruelty designed to keep his arms pinned. 50,000 volts hummed through the metal bars, a low, deadly vibration. His gaze was so intense, so devoid of fear, that the guards found themselves backing away. Outside, the traitors' escape was short-lived. A blockade of FBI vehicles boxed them in. Fleming stepped out of the lead car, his face a mask of cold fury. "We know everything," he spat. "Walker is alive. The kids are safe. You are finished." He watched as they were dragged away, but his mind was already on the ticking clock. Turning toward the embassy, Fleming dialed the ambassador. "You have 11 minutes. The ambassador scoffed, citing international law. Fleming simply watched the clock. Inside, the guards began to panic. They heard the roar of engines and tactical boots. The ambassador, cornered and desperate, screamed his final orders. "Flip the switch!" As the main breaker clicked, the cables began to glow with a lethal current. At that exact moment, the embassy gate exploded in a magnificent shower of sparks. The FBI team surged forward through the smoke, their weapons raised, but the switch had already been thrown. The current reached a crescendo. Inside the cold, sterile walls of the embassy, the air hummed with a lethal current. Guards worked with mechanical precision, locking heavy cables between Simon and the metallic cage. Suddenly, electricity surged like a tidal wave. Simon's body convulsed violently. Smoke and sparks erupted from his skin. The very fabric of the building began to ignite. Panic took hold. People scrambled for exits as the structure groaned. Outside, the sky turned an impossible, ink-black hue. A colossal whirlpool of fire descended. Fleming watched the horror unfold, his face pale. The building vanished. A massive explosion rocked the ground, sending a shockwave through the city. Military trucks and soldiers swarmed the perimeter, sealing off the district. Above, helicopters circled like vultures, unable to approach the searing heat. Tanner arrived, standing silently beside Fleming. Fleming wept openly, his eyes fixed on the smoldering rubble. He had loved the boy. He recounted the final moments to Tanner, while news crews broadcasted the catastrophe. At the hotel, Sarah clutched her children, Lily and Eric, to her chest. Agent Walker, recovering from a jagged neck wound, reached for her phone. She knew Simon had saved her life. The bullet had been deflected by his power. She called Fleming, her voice trembling. "Is Simon okay?" she whispered. Fleming hesitated, the silence stretching for an eternity. "He is gone," he finally replied. But then, Fleming froze. Through his binoculars, he saw a figure emerging. It was Simon, wreathed in living flames, his eyes burning a deep, celestial red. A pillar of light stretched into the heavens, and from it, radiant beings descended. Wherever they touched the earth, people disintegrated into ash. Fleming rushed forward, shouting through a megaphone, Simon, stop this! A voice, cold and ancient, echoed. I cannot. The gates are broken. Judgment Day has begun. Fleming summoned Sarah to the edge of the abyss. When she arrived, the heat was so intense it was melting metal nearby. Ignoring the warnings, she ran toward the column of fire. Miraculously, the flames parted for her. Recognizing her blood, she screamed his name, but Simon stood silent for 10 long minutes. Do not come closer, Sarah, he warned, his voice a hollow shell. You will burn. End this, she sobbed, her heart breaking. You are destroying everything you loved. Simon hesitated, the fire flickering. There is only one way, he explained. He spoke of the requirement, a non-magnetic bullet, fired by the one who gave him life. Sarah collapsed to her knees, screaming no, into the wind. Fleming knelt beside her. 2 billion are dead. The world is ending. You must do it. Fleming ordered the gold bullets from the lab. He loaded the weapon with a heavy heart and placed it in Sarah's trembling hand. Sarah walked toward the fire, her steps uneven and heavy. 10 feet from the boy, she stopped, begging him one last time to find another way. Simon looked at her, and for a moment, the ancient coldness vanished. I am David, he said softly. My soul is safe. Please, Sarah, do it. The world stood still as she raised the weapon. The fire roared, the wind howled. Please, my love, my life, don't make me do it. I will die right here with you. Please, please, do not do this. With a final, choked sob, she pulled the trigger. The pillar of light shattered, and the world fell into a profound, grieving silence. It was over. Fleming and Tanner ran towards Sarah. It seemed like miles until they reached her. She fainted, and as she crumpled to the ground, she reached out towards Simon. He was lying there, inanimate. They took Sarah and made her come back to the sad reality and hurtful future that she had killed with her own hand her beloved 8-year-old child. Fleming lifted Simon from the ground in his arms, and Tanner held Sarah against him to help her walk. They all in an F.B.I. black car that took them to the hotel parking garage. Sarah felt like a zombie. Her shoulders slumped down. Suddenly, a little hand grabbed hold of hers, and a little voice asked, Mommy, what happened? All three jumped and looked at Simon, eyes wide open. Oh my God, what is this? A miracle. Sarah cried her heart out, but this time her tears were of joy. She took Simon in her arms and kissed his face and his hands endlessly. Mommy, what happened? Simon asked again. Why are you crying? Mommy, what happened? Simon asked again. Why are you crying? You do not remember? Nothing? Sarah had been revived. She couldn't contain her happiness. Fleming, we are so happy that you are okay. Fleming looked at Simon's chest and saw no bullet hole. Simon asked, Who are you? Do I know you? Sarah, Fleming, and Tanner looked at each other, and for a moment they were totally confused. David? Sarah asked. Simon asked, Why are you calling me David? They all smiled, and Tanner said, It is better this way. He will be able to live like a normal child. They all laughed. Simon looked at his mother and winked. She was the only one that saw it.